Greetings, dear participants. We are good to begin. We are happy to bring to you this webinar titled From Data Chaos to AI-Driven Insights, How Leading BFSI Firms Will Win in 2026. As you all know, the BFSI sector faces a perfect storm of challenges, all the way from massive volumes of both structured and unstructured data to regulatory challenges. All of this while being expected to deliver real-time insights and enhance customer experience. So it is clear that maybe the traditional data management approaches may no longer be enough or sufficient. In this session, we'll try and explore a couple of options in terms of a roadmap for BFSI firms to move from this data chaos to AI-driven intelligence by unlocking faster decision-making, reducing operational inefficiencies, and powering some customer-first innovation. So before we get started and before I make some introductions, some housekeeping announcements to begin with. We will run this discussion for approximately 35 to 40 minutes, with 15 to 20 minutes at the end reserved for questions. We would encourage participants to key in their questions using the option provided on your screens. And towards the end, once the primary discussion is complete, these questions shall be picked up, deduplicated, and then we'll run through those questions and have some answers coming across, right? Okay, so that's for the background. Let me start with some introductions. My name is Sriram Melarkod. I have close to 3 decades of experience building technology solutions, primarily in BFSI. My panel has 2 very contrasting personalities, and I'm very happy to bring them both to you. Allow me to introduce Mahesh Goriwale.
Hi.
With over 25 years of extensive experience in the IT industry, Mahesh has consistently delivered innovative IT solutions for the BFSI sector, particularly in capital markets and banking. At Parametrics, as the Executive Director and Delivery Head for key accounts, Mahesh oversees solution architecting, business analysis, database and data warehouse design and delivery. His leadership drives the successful execution of critical projects, ensuring strategic outcomes and client satisfaction. Mahesh's eclectic interests include cricket on one end and poetry on the other. So welcome, Mahesh.
Thanks.
Now, it's not every day you get to introduce someone who's basically been shaping the financial tech landscape while the rest of us were still figuring out how to spell digital transformation. With nearly 3 decades of experience and probably just as many acronyms under his belt, Shankar Sean Banerjee, or Shanky as he's known, has worn many hats than most of us own. From steering innovation at the National Stock Exchange to driving transformation as CIO of RBL Bank, he's been the calm at the center of the tech storm. As an advisor to private equity, banks, NBFCs, product companies, and startups, he acts as their technology compass, helping not only keep up with the times, but maybe stay 2 steps ahead. His annual adventure is a solo bicycle ride topping 1,500 kilometers across different countries. Please welcome our second panelist and someone who probably runs on APIs instead of coffee, Sankarshan Banerjee. Okay, so let's dive in now, beginning with you, Mahesh. From a data perspective, what is the biggest hurdle to getting AI ready? I think that's a big question on everyone's mind.
Yeah, that's a $1,000,000 question, Sriram. Everyone today talks about becoming AI driven, but very few realize that real challenge is not the implementation of the AI, it's the data that feeds the AI model. Okay, let me share a couple of incidents. One of our client wanted to implement our gamification platform, that is Plemity. That platform has a capability to send AI-generated personalized nudges to the sales team employees on daily basis so that they can get motivated and bring in more business. But however, when we assess their data, we realize that their incentive calculation system, which was the primary source for the primitive platform, that system process the incentive calculation on monthly basis, and our Plemity platform requires data on daily basis. So because of this data readiness issue, we couldn't implement the Plemity platform at that moment, and the implementation now got postponed till the time they built the daily processing of their incentive calculation system. So that is the one major hurdle, that is the data readiness. Uh, Second major hurdle is nothing but the data fragmentation. That was with one of the non-banking financial client, where they had a multiple data origination system, okay, to manage their different lending products like gold loan, SME, mortgage. During the data assessment process for the couple of AI use cases, we observe that the customer data, the same customer was existed in the multiple LOS system, and because of that, this such data fragmentation, uh, we were facing the our AI model giving was not giving the proper output. So the data fragmentation is one of the major concern where where which impacts the AI models. Okay. Next, we can eliminate this data fragmentation issue by implementing the central data store like the data warehouse or the data lakehouse. But however, that doesn't resolve the quality issue, because we just centralizing the data at the central place, and we are for the cleaning the issue, we need to run the data cleaning engine, which cleans the data and standardize the data. And most of the companies does follow this process and provide the clean data uh, uh, to the AI model to get the desired output. However, however, that this concern, or however, this doesn't resolve the root cause of the problem, that is the data fragmentation in the source system. To resolve that, we need to feedback loop. We need to create a feedback loop in the data store, which connects to the source data system through via API and cleans the data. Okay, so that the data, so that the data uh, consistency is maintained at the source itself, and the data will be ready for the AI model. So this is the one way of the cleansing data, that is the feedback loop. Another way is the implementing the master data management framework, which maintain the single golden record, and all other systems like LMS, LOS, CRM can refers to this master data management framework for these key entities, and which will ensure the consistency uh, uh, at the source level, and the data will be ready for the AI model.
That's very insightful, Mahesh. But tell me, sometimes even with clean and high quality data, an AI model sometimes fails to deliver the kind of expected results. What could be
Yeah.
the possible reasons for this?
So Shram, that's a right observation. Okay. Even though the data is clean, but still the AI model doesn't perform very well. That's because of the primarily the two reasons. One is the One is the frequency that data gets available to the AI model. Okay, for example, uh, if the AI model require a data on real time basis, and if they are getting the data in batch mode, probably in the night, then those data models won't deliver the desired insights to the enterprise. Second is the for uh, Second is the flaw data model. Okay. For example, what are the data models are there? Mostly the built for the reporting purpose, as far as the department or the organizations are required. But this AI model built on this reporting focus data model won't deliver the desired output. Okay. Let me give an example. a bank in the context of the anti-money laundering, the bank may have a data structure separate for the retail banking and corporate banking. Okay, and suppose there is no relation between them. Okay, so if there is a model, AI-driven AML model, which runs separately for both for the retail banking and the corporate banking. Suppose there is a customer, okay, which is having the personal account and also is a director in the in a private limited company and having the corporate account in the same bank. Okay, and that customer, suppose that customer is a personal banking account shows a very high volume of the high value deposit of the fraudulent transactions. So the personal banking AI ML model can observe this activity and flag that customer as a red high risk customer. But however, both the personal banking and the corporate banking are not related. So this red flagging won't influence the corporate banking risk profile. So this is the one example of the flaw data model. So in summary, the frequency and the flaw data model are the primary reason for failing the AI models and are not providing the desired outcome.
Understood. So the framework that, if I were to summarize the framework, you're talking about AI readiness kind of depending upon, instead of just having a centralized storage, the objective is to achieve a clean and unified data source, right, which is supported by robust data models and enforced by a proactive feedback loop, and all this delivered at real-time speeds, right? I
Right.
mean, if I understand it correctly. Now, turning to you, Shanky, I mean, looking globally, how far along are financial institutions in AI readiness? Shanky,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm on mute. Yeah, I'll just take 2 or 3. See what Manish just said. That we need clean data, we need data at one place, we need data fast. You've been saying that well before AI. When we were BI, 30 years ago, you were saying exactly the same thing, right? We need clean data, we need data at one place, we need to understand the structure of data. Actually, AI does not require that. AI is very good at making sense of bad data, like humans are. Humans are very good at bad data. That's the whole point. If you were to write a structured SQL query, then of course you need clean data. But you can actually upload an unstructured Excel into an AI model and ask it questions. And you can routinely do this to even today's retail-based AI models. Forget, really high quality, if you put a lot of compute power behind it. OpenAI is giving you tiny amounts of compute power from its massive scale of data centers. The compute power average individual retail gets is pretty small, but you upload an unstructured Excel into it and ask questions, it will give you a perfectly sensible answer. Because unlike the traditional BI models, AI does not actually need good quality data. It can figure out on its own what the correlations are. That's what the pre-trained part of GPT is. GPT is what generative pre-trained transformer, right? So generative is that I'm generating new answers. The pre-trained part means I already have a lot of context. I understand what the director of a company is. I understand what a personal savings account is, and therefore, if I see two different things, one is, let's say, an annual report of a company that lists all its directors, and the bank statement that lists his personal bank account, I can put the two together because I'm pre-trained. I understand the context without you having to tell me the context. The you have to tell me the context is where structured data comes in, which you don't have to do as much anymore. Like humans, you don't have to train a human to say, "Acha, annual report पढ़ो, bank account का statement पढ़ो and link the two together." Humans of course, humans are far ahead of AI. AI is nowhere near humans today. But the fact is, it's the same progression that we can deal with less and less definite data, more and more ambiguous data. And the more decisions you're asked to make, the more you will not have perfect information. If you have perfect information, then write an SQL query. And AI is a very expensive way to get the same answer. if you already have perfect data. If you have very good quality data with very good structure understanding, an SQL query will serve you far better. If you have bad data, which unfortunately most companies do, there is no easy way to clean up everything. And AML is a good example. In AML, by definition, most data is fuzzy because it comes from many different sources and many different countries and many different. For instance, Shah Rukh Khan appears 20,000 times in an AML list. Now, which Shah Rukh Khan is a money laundering list as opposed to which one is a rickshawala, it's very hard for you to understand. It is hard for anyone to understand. So there's a lot of fuzziness that goes into it. And that's where AI excels. AI excels in this fuzziness. Now, and again, the other challenge that we've been faced with a lot is collecting all the data in one place, the data lake. And it has been a challenge. It's not easy to do. People have tried many times, and it's not, even all the recent banks have tried. It has become easier to do, but it
I think his video is paused. Yeah,
because,
you're
especially in the
back.
modern world,
Sorry, Shanky, you were off for about 10 seconds.
okay,
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yes, yes.
So Google has been propagating this idea for a few years now that you should leave the data where it is. Data you don't move. If the original source system has the data, let it remain there. Because compute has become quite cheap and quite universal, you can actually send the compute to the data rather than the data to the compute. So, because compute is cheap, it's in the cloud. Your core banking system is on the same cloud, private cloud, public cloud as many of your reporting systems. Either you have everything on cloud or you have private clouds. And so instead of sending data to compute, because data is huge, compute is quite small, relatively speaking. You send compute to data. You spin up a processor in the same context that the data already is and run it like an agent. So you say, it's like I have three junior MBAs. One guy goes to the compliance department, one guy goes to the wealth department, one guy goes to the mailroom department. And each run their own queries and come back and assemble it together. So AI can do that. You can take the AI and make it run three separate agents that behave in three different ways. Same engine, but three different personality, which is that context setting. You can say this copy of the agent behave like a researcher. That copy of the agent behave like a auditor. And gather these from their original source system, gather the answer back. And because you effectively have infinite compute, you can do this to 10 systems, 300 systems, 5,000 systems. Earlier, the problem was you did not have infinite, you had very limited compute. So if you started doing all this, you would run out of compute very quickly. Today, that is not a problem. Today, my cell phone has more compute than the first bank I started working for. And it's not an exaggeration. My cell phone does indeed have more compute than the bank I started when I first started my job. I had helped set up IndusInd Bank. The total compute of IndusInd Bank is less than my cell phone today. I have a fancy cell phone, of course, but it's not that fancy. The fact is, compute has become enormously more. And we have, in fact, failed to make use of that enormous increase in complexity. Now, data pipelines have also become enormously more, but not that much. You've gone from kilobytes to megabytes to gigabytes. But we are talking about petabytes of data. So, therefore, you have to shift. You have to send compute to data rather than data to compute. And you have to, because AI allows you, you should start thinking of not having structured data, because clean data is an impossible answer. We've tried it for 30 years and I've never seen anybody get their data clean. By the time we get it clean, it goes dirty again. It's like the kid in the playground, the surf card.
Excellent, excellent. Always delightful to have your counterpoint, Shanky. So this is another way for BFSI players to actually get a head start in AI use cases, is what I understand, right? Of course, this would require them to invest straight away rather than, go about in that structured manner, which we saw a little while sooner, which Mahesh was describing.
Yeah.
But then this
So
would
again, AI
also,
will not do everything. So what Mahesh is describing is still going to be needed, because you can't suddenly say, Acha, AI will do everything. All my cars are driverless. That won't happen, right? But when you do have driverless, when you do have a lot of AI, you can make use of the fact that you don't have clean data. In fact, now you should start thinking, wherever I don't have clean AI, let's use AI rather than starting to clean the data.
Right, right. So it will require sort of rethinking technology frameworks, rethinking architectures to that effect, right? And for those that aren't looking to do that immediately, there is always a traditional way to go about it, of course, right? Before we proceed, a quick reminder to all participants, you can write in your questions using the Q&A box, which is there on your screens. We'll collate them and answer them towards the end of the discussion. Coming back, Mahesh, what in your view is a practical roadmap for modernizing legacy systems to support AI in maybe the next couple of years?
According to me, the simplest way to modernize is to replace the old legacy system with the modern tech cloud-based system. Okay, but practically it's not feasible for most of the BFSI companies due to various reasons. Okay, so some realistic approach is nothing but the phase manner approach. Primarily, it's called as a strangle pattern, okay, where it has a three-phase approach. First year, second year, third year. It's primarily spanned between from 24 months to 36 months. This is the scope of the modernization. So in the first phase is the assessment and the API-led connectivity. Okay, as part of this assessment phase, the primary focus is on the audit of the all the systems and the data, how they are connected, how the data is moving from the one system to another system, how the data is flowing from one system to another system, and and discovering the various challenges like data silos or the data quality issues or AI bottleneck, and addressing those issues in this phase. Okay, so primary focus is the assessment. Then the next step is the API-led connectivity. See, modernizing. So for the AI, for implementing the AI use cases, so in the legacy system, considering the legacy system. So if you despite modifying the legacy system for the AI use cases, the another approach is the building a API layer on top of them. Okay, for example, uh, for example, if any AI chatbot or the AI agent need transaction data or the balance data, then we can build an API on the legacy system, and this API can be consumed by the chatbot or the AI agent to address the or answer the real-time queries raised by the customer. So this is the one way of the uh, one for the first uh, phase, we focus on the API-led connectivity and the assessment. Next phase is the building the centralized data lakehouse, initiate the AI pilot, as well as the modelization of the key model of the legacy system. Okay, so centralizing the data store help to consolidate fragmented data into the central place and clean the data. Okay, so that those clean data can be fed to the AI models, as well as have a we can initiate a pilot project for the AI implementation, like fraud detection in the phase two, and we can initiate the one of the key functionality of the core system as a modelization, which will be built using the microservices with the AI powered microservices, and we can test it on the data lakehouse and the API connectivity, and we will ensure that everything platform is ready in the second year. When
That's,
you
yeah, go on.
Yeah, in the next year when we move, we ensure we know that the platform is ready. Now we touch all the key legacy system, and we try to convert their key functionality using the microservices, AI powered microservices, and we try to consume those into the business as well. For example, the fraud detection, loan eligibility API. So all those functionality will be consumed in a business. So that's the next step. But while doing so, we need to ensure that we need to follow the guidelines of the regulatories like RBI and what the SEBI says. Uh, we need to we need to ensure that AI models are traceable, okay, explainable, and auditable. Okay, so we need to implement the AI governance framework, as well as we need to establish a AI governance committee which will be responsible of the traceability and explainability of the AI models. So this is the structured way of implementing the modernized way modernizing the legacy application for AI ready.
That's a solid and reassuring roadmap. Thank you, Mahesh. But Shanky, I mean, do you agree with those use cases? Are they the first few use cases? I mean, you advise BFSI boardrooms, so that's typically a question
So,
to you. What
yeah.
kind of first AI use cases should a BFSI player typically begin with?
So actually, I say nowadays don't worry about use cases because AI, of course, is moderately mature, but it's progressing nevertheless at a fantastic speed, at a speed that I've not seen any other technology in my lifetime. Internet, the technology underlying did not progress very much so quickly. I mean, uh, the protocol, of course, was set up, but the speed of the data transfer speeds and all took a while to jump up. We stayed in the modem phase for about 5 6 years, right? Um, then similarly, cloud, this, that, all these technologies, the rate at which AI is galloping forward is far faster than that. I mean, a year ago AI was less capable. Today it's considerably more capable. And therefore, if we start projecting use cases, by the time we finish the pilot, the technology underlying has been obsoleted. So it's very hard to say that this AI set of use cases is a good set. What Mahesh said is a perfectly good set as far as I can think of today. But if you ask, a 10-year-old whether they are good, he'll probably not think very much of you. And this is social media was similarly. I used to think I know social media. My nephew said you're absolutely useless at social media, um, because that's not how it works. And these things have progressed so fast that I'm very wary of saying this is the use case. What I want to do is say this is the foundation. So, like Mahesh was describing, strangler fig pattern. Start implementing strangler fig. You can't implement overnight. You have to set up the underlying framework and governance for it. So start doing that quickly. All your legacy systems you need to modernize. That is one big thing that all banks and BFSI needs to recognize today. BFSI has gotten away by saying we will not touch our core systems. Many banks, even in India, are still on core systems that they bought 15, 20 years ago. And they have not really invested because they say, Arey, we are whatever, compliant, this, that. But basically, it's resistance to change. Now, that resistance overcoming is not easy. And that's the foundation you need to start setting up. So strangler fig is one, hollow the core is another one. These two are the most common in the BFSI world. Hollow the core means you use the core functional system for less and less things. You put more things into the API layer, which is handled by some satellite system, and you only reconcile with the core. So these two, strangler fig and hollow the core, are the two most common transformation engines that we've been using in BFSI. There are a few others in other places, but this is all from Martin Fowler's famous paper about 12 years ago. Anyway, so, but that foundation you need to set. The AI, the speed of change is going to force you to choose between staying back or coming forward, because it is going to create winners and losers, like every other technology has had. But in internet took 7, 8, 10 years. So you had lots of time to become from winner to loser, from loser to winner. You could lose for a while and then still catch up. But the faster the technology evolves, the bigger the gap between loser and winner. It's harder for the loser to catch up because, so in the even the NBFC example in India, there are some of these NBFC players that have invested on in the older forms of AI many years ago, gathering the data, putting it together, cleaning it up. And now they're very difficult to beat in that paradigm. in the old machine learning paradigm because, they already have all this. Now, somebody who's starting today is going to take 5 years to get it. And because the technology is progressing faster, they're becoming obsolete faster also. So they're taking 5 years. Somebody has progressed much more in the next 5 years than they had in the last 5 years. So the gap is becoming bigger and bigger. And that's the challenge. You need to start putting your foundations in place rather quickly. I think Mahesh's 3 year timeline is too long now. 3 years, man. So just to give you, it took 7 years for CDs to DVDs to be invented to the point that they become obsolete. Today, none of you, I'm sure, have a DVD player. It took only 7 years for DVDs. It took about 100 odd years for vinyl, and vinyl, in fact, still around. So you see, you should therefore be very wary of taking long timelines or timelines of the last technology and applying it to this technology. I would say use the strangler fig, use the hollow the core, but do it faster. You don't actually have 3 years anymore.
Interesting views as always, Shanky. Moving on, one very often pondered question, and it kind of comes in most of these conversations relating to AI is that data governance often ends up blocking AI progress. So how do we fix that? Mahesh, maybe I can ask you first. What's your view on this?
Sriram, frankly speaking, I feel data governance isn't a hurdle to AI. It's uh, but I can say when it applied rigidly, okay, or manually, then it slow down the AI implementation journey. Okay. So, take example, uh, in BFSI company, we have seen most of the approvals, okay, still goes through, yeah, still passes through the multiple layers. Okay. So as until we get all the approvals, we don't get access to the desired or required data set. So this approval process slow down the AI model development. Okay. So similar challenge we were facing with one of our client, and we had a discussion with their key stakeholders with them, and we discuss and agree to implement automated policy-driven governance platform. Okay, okay. So that platform uh, had 3 layers of controls. Okay, the first is a data classification service. So that service usually scans the entire data set and identify the and tag the fields like internal, confidential, restricted, or public. Okay. So that service take care of the tagging of the tagging of the field. Then the for example, take example the product or the branch. Okay, so that those field can be tagged as a internal, whereas the Aadhaar or PAN can be tagged as a restricted. Even salary can be tagged as a confidential. So this tagging was taken care by the data classification service. Next layer is the policy-based access control. This policy-based access control defined the different policies basis the user roles and the sensitivity level. Uh, so policies and these policies are applied dynamically. If user requests internal data, the access is instant access is granted instantly. But if it includes the restricted data, then the platform marks or tokenize automatically. So that control taken by the policy-based access control. Then next is the automated workflow for providing the access. Okay, so that workflow the client had a workflow platform. We integrated that platform with the policy-based access control. So anyone who want to access the sensitivity data, they raise a request to the workload platform, and that request goes to the predefined data owner. If it approves, then the workflow platform, which are actually directly connected to the policy-based access control to a RESTful API, then the access rule through RESTful API, the access rule was getting changed and refreshed. So by implementing this process, we could save around 75% of the time in the data governance as compared to the manual process.
Amazing. So you're basically saying that governance itself is evolving and it is going from being just a gatekeeper to becoming some sort of a growth enabler.
Right, right.
Excellent, excellent. So Shanky, what do you think regulators will expect from AI-enabled banks and financial institutions, APAC beyond wherever?
So regulators have debated a lot. I mean, regulation is still evolving, largely because regulation always evolves at a lag to technology. You cannot regulate something that doesn't exist. For instance, there is no regulation of teleportation, for instance, because it doesn't exist. We don't know how to regulate it. So regulation of AI, therefore, is coming at a lag. RBI has issued a thought paper to say this is how we might think about regulation. See, that is the paper that they have issued, they have repeatedly clarified, and hopefully they will stick to their word, is that it's not actually a regulation. You are not expected to, from tomorrow, comply to it. What you're expected to do is use that framework to start thinking about the ideas that it presents: transparency, fairness, explainability, and how you, as you implement your use cases, you will start implementing those ideas. There's no procedure involved there. It's an idea. Like transparency is an idea. What data have I used to create this decision? That is transparency. So that idea we have to implement in different ways. For instance, a lending decision will have a different idea of transparency from a decision to refund a fraud, right? And some will be more transparent. In a lending decision, you may not be very transparent to the customer. Even today, you're not. People get refused lending decision without the bank having to explain what parameters caused it to be refused. Mm, a good bank will often explain. A bad bank will often not explain. And the regulation doesn't say you have to explain. Regulation says it's a good idea to be transparent. Now, what Mahesh described is, again, remember, a bit traditional. It's a very complex way to do data governance. What Mahesh described is not easy to implement, so many steps, so much control. So people in the AI world have started thinking, how can I make this easier? So one of the concepts of AI is AI can be your digital twin. It can behave in your context. So if I say, let's say, Sriram, you are the compliance officer. Now you have access to a certain amount of data already as part of the existing data governance of a bank. So I will have an AI that runs in your context and does what you want the AI to do. It's like you say, if you send your own email, you don't need any particular permission. If your secretary sends emails on your behalf, then there is a lot of permission involved. He or she can only send certain kinds of emails, can only read certain kinds. If it's confidential, he or she cannot read it. He cannot respond to certain things, and so on. All that governance is required because a second person is performing some task that you are entitled to do. AI, on the other hand, is not a second person. It is performing the tasks you have authorized it to do under your context. It is your twin. And of course, if it does something wrong, it's your headache, not some independent party. So unlike a giant AI where you bring the data to that AI and it gives you answers and you go back with those answers, like the Oracle of Delphi, you go to Greece, the temple, you go up the temple, give your offering, and you get the answer back, and the priest brings the answer down to you. इंडिया में भी बहुत होता है ना, माउंटेन के ऊपर टेम्पल होता है, शरणार्थी नीचे होते हैं, वो आंसर उसके पास आता है. AI doesn't work like that. AI is, I have a trained agent. That agent comes to me, and I make it my digital twin. Whatever rights I have, the AI has. That makes data governance a lot easier because it is not the agent that is doing things. It is Sriram that is doing things. And that governance already exists. Again, it requires a bit of foundation setting so that the behavior of Sriram's AI agent is restricted to what Sriram would do. And that once you get that, which is again becoming increasingly mature, once you get that, then you can do a lot of. And so that's the modern thinking. Again, remember, it's all evolution. Nobody has done this for 10 years and therefore knows every problem or every advantage. This is all things that we are debating can be possible with AI. So implementation wise, it is possible. We can indeed make a decent digital twin out of it. We can train it to behave like you, to make the same kind of decisions that you do quite easily. This doesn't take very much effort. But how that plays up in the larger context of business decisions 1,000 times or 10,000 times or 20,000 times over, that we have to see. And that is what will evolve over time. Again, it is not that the temple wala story where people go to the temple with the offerings and come back with the answers. That model will also not go away because some things are better done by an external temple. Some things are better done outside the context of a company. You want a collective answer. But some things are better done in the context of an individual role already. The roles are already defined. You already have role-based access. It's just that now humans have access. Now, if you have intelligent agents that can behave like that human, see, it doesn't need to behave like Sriram. It needs to behave like a central compliance officer, a competent central compliance officer. And then take those actions, some of those actions that he would otherwise have to use human judgment to take.
Outstanding.
And it's already happening. People have tried, for instance, it's very common to replace the maker of the loan origination system with an agent who has the same rights as the human maker, but is an agent.
Right.
The checker is still a human because you still, I'm not sure how well the agent behaves, how well the bot behaves. But if you make the maker an agent, then the data governance problem becomes a lot smaller because you already have it defined.
Right. It reminds me of a very similar kind of circumstance. So, Parametrics has this product called Convex, which is conversational AI, and it's basically it enables insightful access to the organization's enterprise's own data. And the way in which it has been designed is in such a way that it has kept the entire compliance and RBAC in mind. The role-based access control is completely built into it. It's baked into its DNA. So it only provides accesses as required, while at the same time being able to give a very insightful response to the kind of questions that come in. So, I think this has been great, but I should be mindful of the time. We've really crossed 40 minutes. So, what I will do is we will delve into the questions that have come in, and quite a bunch of them have come in. Before that, very quickly to summarize, we saw very radically different approaches to BFSI players using AI. One that prepares the data for AI, and the other which directly applies AI to the existing data. Both very interesting approaches, of course. We also had some very deep insights into modernization, governance, and some crystal gazing into the future, which we indulged in. Basis this, if we
May I put one small interjection in the middle?
please.
You see, we are still going through this curve of machine learning to AI. And I must tell you, there's a fundamental difference that many people miss out. You see, machine learning was to create a model by giving it examples, training it, right? And therefore, it was very different idea. So, and you could create statistical models, you could create feedback loop based neural network models, right? But you needed to feed it a lot of training data. The GPT models, the modern ones are, of course, GPT is not the only thing that they use, but the modern AI models, the Chat GPT and Grok and Geminis of the world, they behave a little differently. The data you're feeding them is not training data. They are already trained. The data you're feeding them is context data. It's like you get a graduate who's come out of college having learned the basic theory of accounting and the basic theory of science and this and that. You don't have to teach him accounting. You have to show him your company's balance sheet. And he, of course, can then make sense of it. Right? So the modern AI world is like that. He comes trained. Unlike earlier, where you had to give it training data, where you have to train it, you no longer have to train it. You have to give it context. Now, the context may be temporary. In the context of one query, let's say I want to understand Parametrics' balance sheet. Okay, I go to OpenAI, give it Parametrics' balance sheet, ask questions, and then Parametrics' balance sheet is forgotten by OpenAI because context is over, temporary context. Or I can say, I will keep asking. Every quarter I will ask because I've invested in Parametrics. Every quarter I will ask you about your balance sheet. So then OpenAI, then I can create an agent that is a permanent researcher for Parametrics. And that is the difference. But the main thing is they are context. They are RAG. They are not training data. Training data, you have to bring the data to the model. Context, you have to bring the model to the data. कि ये जो context, I mean, ये जो parametrics का balance sheet है, इधर जाके देखो. I'm not actually copying the balance sheet. I'm saying they publish their balance sheet in this URL. Go read that URL.
Outstanding. Outstanding. So jumping into the questions quickly. So the first question we have is, how can BFSI firms break data silos without replacing their existing legacy systems? Mahesh, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah. So as I already explained, so we can have a centralized data store where we can consolidate data from the fragmented of the different fragmented legacy system at a central place. Another way is the API, calling API, building the API on top of the each legacy system and access the required data. So these are the two ways. The third way is, as I mentioned, the master data management implementation of master data management framework, where we will ensure the single golden record, and all other system would be accessing this uh, data from the master data management system.
Outstanding. That's nice. So the next question we have, and I think probably
So
Shanky.
I have a small add-on to this data silo thing. See,
Right.
what Mahesh describes is the technology answers. But most data silos are because organizational people want to protect their data. They don't want to participate in these initiatives. That there is no AI answer to.
Right. Very true that. I mean, it almost becomes a turf battle, so to say.
Not almost. It is a tough battle. And, many entrenched companies, the tough battle is where most of these flounder. These technologies have been around for a while and they're quite mature and they're quite effective. But they flounder because of the inability of the leaders to separate out their concerns from each other.
Right. So the next question we have is, considering we have discussed two diverse approaches on AI road mapping, and I was expecting this question, quite frankly, how can an organization deploy a hybrid methodology to implement AI initiatives? Or do you think organizations will have to choose one over the other?
I think they should do both. See, the what Mahesh describes as the traditional model that is well understood and implementable, but it comes with a lot of challenges. It is not easy to implement, and we know its problems also. For 20 years we've been trying, so there's a lot of problems that we know. That's why it takes a while. It takes a lot of effort. But and the AI approach has some very strong advantages to that, but it will come with its own set of disadvantages, many of which we don't know yet because we haven't spent enough time in that world. Okay? So therefore, you need to do both in parallel simultaneously.
Right. And if I may add, it's also about whether you're front-ending the entire expense and the thought process, or you're kind of, going about it in a structured way where, as you go along, you will end up spending as well.
No. See here, Indian BFSI has been traditionally nearly zero on innovation. Nearly zero money. I'm actually talking. If you take any balance sheet of any BFSI company, the percentage allocated to innovation, if it's a great company, is 2%. Okay?
Correct.
Compared to many global companies that allocate, global banks and financial institutions that allocate 8%. DeepSeek came out of a hedge fund. Okay? Most of these innovations did indeed come from financial companies, but not in India. Because India has traditionally not done this. We believe that we are protected environment, the banking And you use excuses to say कि नहीं नहीं governance के लिए ही है, RBI के लिए ही है. ऐसा कुछ है नहीं. I mean, if you wanted to innovate, you could innovate, ठीक है ना? But because we are in a protected environment, we can get away by not innovating. So, and therefore, the private banks that have indeed innovated have jumped forward well beyond many of the public sector banks. Public sector banks had a 100-year lead and a 50 lakh customer lead. Even then, an ICICI and an HDFC Bank came in and became number 2 and number 3, right? Because they used to spend a lot of time and money innovating. So there is value to innovation, which unfortunately in India, nobody is spending on. So this, when I say two-track AI, you need to put aside a certain amount of money with no short-term benefits. To say I will invest this amount of money, not like 10,000 crores, but certain amount of money reasonable to your turnover, not 2% of your turnover, like more like 8% of your turnover. No, by the way, it's not 2% of turnover. Most companies spend 2% of expense, which is less than 1% of turnover.
Right. Right.
So I'm saying put some more money aside. You are going to be faced with a large amount of change. There is a good chance you will be left far behind. The distance, the gap nowadays is not like, on foot versus bicycle. It is on foot versus a jumbo jet. Right. So therefore, you need to spend a lot of decent amount of money making sure that you are trying to keep up with all this, even if there is no short-term benefit.
Right. Another question we have, and Mahesh, probably you will be, this is right up your alley. A majority of banks say they are data rich, but usually insight poor. Does the problem lie in the data, the models, or the questions we are asking? I almost know the answer, but please,
Yeah. So primarily the issue is because of the data. Okay, if the data is if there is an issue in the data, then that in that uh, and fraudulent data is feeding to the AI models, and obviously you will not get the desired output. Okay, the data could be the fragmented data, the stale data, or the it's not relevant. Then it's relevant to use cases. Then your AI use case or your AI model won't return or desired output. Even though if they don't get a data on time, then again the data model won't get or won't provided whatever the output required by the enterprises. Okay, so primarily the data is the issue. Again, the data models also could be the issue, as I mentioned in my uh, speech. If there is the underlying data relationship is not there between the two model wherever it is required, then the AI model won't produce the proper output. So data is primarily, and data model is also the issue in case of the uh,
So,
poor
I, as a
insights.
mathematician, have a slightly different point of view on this. It is indeed the data, but not what Mahesh thinks. And I spent a lot of time in banks. So, uh, the problem with banks is that they have done the same thing again and again, right? So, if I've lent to a particular credit profile. I've not lent to anybody else. So, therefore, all I have is I have lent to Sriram 50,000 times. It doesn't give me anything new. It merely tells me that if I lend to Sriram again, he will not NPA. Okay, that's what credit scores are. Now, if you look at Capital One, who invented many of these AI-based lending models, Capital One said, the only way, and he was a small bank at that time, right? So they said the only way we make money is to not lend the way other banks lend, which means I will lend to people who don't have good credit scores. But credit score means good data. So I will lend to people who don't have good traditional data. How do I go about doing that? I have to gather data that is not traditional. And he went about trying to do that. Same with Bajaj Finance. They tied up with RBL Bank to launch a credit card very early on, one of the earliest large-scale credit card collaboration. Why? Because Bajaj said, I have a particular kind of data. I fund people who buy TVs and fridges. Okay. How do I get other kinds of data? One of the best ways to get other kinds of data is a credit card.
Right.
If you look at, even retail, Macy's, for instance, was one of the first guys to introduce a loyalty card. Why did they introduce a loyalty card? There is no particular loyalty in retail, no matter how many cards you have. Okay, now you walk into a store, you buy what you buy, you go out. You go to the next store, you buy what you buy. Unlike an airline, there is no particular loyalty to a, because you have a Macy's card, you will only go to Macy's, aisa hota nahi, you know. But the card gives you a lot of data on what you're spending, not just with Macy's, but with every other one of their competitors. That thing is diversity of data, which gives you different opinions. Banks, especially Indian banks, because they've been very, very, tick mark, credit scorecard based lending, the data is incredibly non-diverse and therefore leads to very little insight. There is nothing, no insight to be had. You pre-program. If you lend to people who are 5'7" and earn 10,000 rupees, all you will know is that 5'7" 10,000 rupees can be lent to. That's it. There is no extra insight to be had there. And that's the problem with Indian banks. They have spent so much time lending to such a narrow subset. India is very, financially, hardly anybody ever gets loans because we lend to only people who qualify. Everybody who qualified has already got a loan and there is no new insight. It's one of those challenges. But there are places, for instance, Indian banks have very good fraud monitoring on transactional data, payment fraud, credit card fraud, all that is, they have a diverse set, they have good fraud monitoring, good models, good detection, 0.5 to 0.3 to 0.5% fraud rate. It's pretty good because they have diversity. We've had credit cards for a while and we've been processing these signals for a while. The knowledge is quite widespread. But in lending, in bank accounts, we've not really had much diversity. Payment aggregator hopefully will fix some of this because at least you'll have diversity across banks. An SBI customer is a little bit different from an RBL customer, is a little bit different from an ICICI customer. So there'll be a little more diversity. And therefore things should improve a little. But, fintechs are trying many non-traditional sources of data to increase this diversity. Till that, you will have lots of data, but very little insight.
So one point I'd like to add here is, I don't think it's an India problem per se. Even globally, they actually say this, that the only way you can convince a bank or a lending institution to give you a loan is to convince them that you don't need it.
Yes and no. I mean, India is a larger problem. You see,
Mm.
because traditionally, firstly, India has very few banks. Most of them were public sector. There's a very narrow set of banks. And therefore, the rules of each public sector bank has been extremely similar historically.
Right.
Private sector has only come in fairly recently, and it has changed the rules a little bit. But for about 100 odd years after, the first banks were founded in the late 19th century in India, about 100 odd years, banks were very, very similar. And therefore, the data is still very similar. Abroad, there has been a lot more private sector, a lot more experiments. So even though by and large the banking system behaves somewhat similarly, there is more diversity than in India. In India, the problem is particularly acute.
Right. So we have one very interesting question here. It's a James Bond kind of question for you. If AI gets so good at predicting financial fraud, will fraudsters start using AI to predict the AI? Is the real arms race happening in Python?
Yeah, of course. There is no chance that we will ever have zero fraud. As we get better at detecting one kind of fraud, other kinds will pop up. It's always going to be an arms race. And in fact, fraudsters will use AI faster than banks will use AI. This is a guarantee. Most technology advancements come from negative use cases. It's an
Absolutely.
unfortunate theory of life. There are, for instance, video streaming was really kicked into high gear by porn sites. Most of what we know about video streaming, all those experiments were done by porn sites. Most of what we know about fraud was actually by learning what fraudsters do rather than, being ahead of them. And, things like war kicks off a lot of technology. It's always that way. There is a larger incentive by the fraudster to learn faster. And once he learns faster, then there is incentive by the bank to keep up.
The same thing is going to happen with quantum as well.
Anything, any technology, the guy who has the most incentive will go the furthest ahead. And the fraudster obviously have the largest incentive.
Right. And one final question. I think we are just enough time to answer this one. What are the ethical considerations while deploying AI for handling sensitive financial data in India?
See, as far as I know, the ethical is about bias, not about sensitivity of the data itself. Because for a machine, there is no moral imperative, right? There's no sensitivity in that sense. But the model may have a bias. So you should not, for instance, not lend to people who would have otherwise got a loan, but you have some bias against them. So there used to be in banks this soft bias against lending to certain geographic areas or certain professions like lawyers, because there's always this fear that they would be litigious. That's a bias, and it's illegal and should not exist. It's a very unfair bias to the lawyers who would have otherwise paid back a loan properly, right? So those are the biases that we should be aware of. See, whatever a human can do, an AI can do at a million scale. So we should be particularly aware of those biases, because biases can be, once you put it in a machine, the bias can be much larger and much harder to remove. So that is one big ethical consideration. In terms of sensitive data, actually, data, there is nothing particularly sensitive or insensitive about it. It is about how humans see it, which human is supposed to see it. And that is a human problem, not an AI problem.
Right.
But yes, bias is an AI problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. I think that's
Oh,
all
and
we have.
the other ethical part, the other one more ethical part is AI is going to make mistakes. We have to build a framework to get that the person who was at the receiving end of the mistake must have redress.
Hmm.
So it's for instance, if I have an AI making lending decisions or hiring decisions, and he incorrectly flags me as ineligible, how do I appeal that process?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is a very important ethical concern.
Agreed. Agreed. Great. I think it has been fantastic. Shanky, Mahesh, it's been a pleasure to host this. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you all participants for joining in. Until next time, that's it from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.